Tracii got paid a lot of money to leave Guns N' Roses. And he signed a non-disclosure, which prevented him from talking about it, and that's why he left. Where would I come up with this story? You know, I mean, this is what I'm hearing from the man himself, from Tracii Guns.
Appetite for Destruction, a lot of the material written on that was done while we were in the club scene in LA. That's over 2 years ago. You know, sometimes 3 years ago, some of it. And Anything Goes was first started about 4 years ago.
For the record, we did reach out to Tracie's PR team for comment, but our request was declined. Before we get to George's interview, here's what Tracii has said in the past about why he left Guns N' Roses. Tracii said, Axl Rose and I had a really great friendship. We were inseparable for a few years. The thing that changed, and I had known, Axl said, I have manic depression. I'm supposed to be taking these meds, but I'm okay. Then one day, Axl was off with a junior high school friend of mine, and he had taken some ecstasy. We didn't see him for a week. Then he showed up at this gig, and he was a completely different person. I was like, who are you? Who's this guy? And that's when the other side of that kicked in. I loved him on the one side, the person I knew, and we were creative together. We were funny together. But at that time, he really wanted to take control over everything around him, and that's when we were getting really popular. Before that, he was more aware and taking in information and kind of sorting out what we were doing and how this is going and all that stuff. But once we knew we were locked and that Guns N' Roses was going only one direction, I mean, sometimes he would talk for 40 minutes out of a 60-minute set on stage. And I would look at Izzy, and Izzy would be very passive about it. I was just like, this isn't a fun rock and roll band anymore. This is something else. It became less about the music toward the end of when I was in the band, and more about this kind of statement, this lifestyle, this kind of shout-out mentality. During an interview with the Metal Voice, when Tracii was asked how long he was a member of Guns N' Roses, the guitarist said, a year. Axl was singing for LA Guns. We did a gig, and there was a big throwdown with another band we played with that night. Our manager fired Axl, but we all lived together. We sat on the couch and decided what we were going to do next, and it was Guns N' Roses. That's all we did. We just changed the name and we added Izzy. On if they were rehearsing the early Guns N' Roses material that we know today, Tracii said, we were playing a lot of those songs in LA Guns. Songs like Don't Cry, Anything Goes, Think About You, a bunch of them. When I was in the band, we were heavier than what people know as Guns N' Roses now. It wasn't as blues-based. It was a little bit more metal. During an interview with Vinyl Rider Music, original Guns N' Roses drummer Rob Gardner offered more insight into the split, saying, Axl was singing for LA Guns, and then Izzy came in. Then our bass player from LA Guns wasn't working out, so Izzy suggested Duff McKagan. Duff had more of an image and kind of just fit our style better. I think Izzy came up with the name and said, hey, that's perfect. Hollywood Rose, LA Guns, Guns N' Roses. Me, Tracii, and our financial investor, Raz, had worked so hard and put all this money into LA Guns and really had a buzz going. And it was like, well, why change that? It's kind of a risk to change it. All of a sudden, the whole LA Guns thing just disappeared into thin air, and now we're Guns N' Roses. And then all of a sudden, you have two more big influences that are trying to take more control and change the name and change the members. So for me and Tracii, not that we didn't like it because it was cool and it was working, I think it was a little more bitter. There weren't any big fights or anything. I'm just saying I think we were both in the back of our minds like, what's going on? And then the drugs really started. Me and Tracii may have smoked some pot here and there and drank, but we never did heavy drugs at that time. So some of the other heavier drugs got introduced, and we were seeing the effects of that too, and we were losing control of everything. We were doing shows, and the shows were good, but then the Hell Tour thing came up. They wanted to go all the way up to Seattle and then work our way back down to Portland and San Francisco. But the vehicle we had was not going to make it. I was thinking, if this thing breaks down, what are we going to do? We didn't have any money. Raz had the money, but he ducked out. He was like, if you guys are going to change the name and do all this, then I'm out of here. So we lost him, and we didn't have any financial backing. Like I said, me and Tracii just felt like we had lost control. And then they wanted to go do this tour in an unreliable van and throw all of our gear in it. Where are we going to stay? How are we going to eat? You can't just walk a whole set of drums to the next town and go, hey, can I leave these here until we get our car fixed? So that's exactly what happened to them. They went there and did it. The van broke down and they all had to hitchhike. And they left all their gear in the car and it all got stolen. I was like, this is the only drum set I got. I'm not jeopardizing it. If we had a better van, I would have probably done it. But they just went off the cuff and did it. So they ended up hitchhiking all the way up there and borrowed equipment from the band they were playing with. It's all about perseverance and determination. We're going to do this no matter what. Let's go. So Tracii decided not to go. I thought it was the other way around. I thought I ducked out of the tour first, and then he ducked out after me like a week later. But my friend Mark Cantor told me it was the other way around. He said, Tracii ducked out first, and then you followed him and said, nah, I'm out of here too. I'm done. That's when we pulled out. Then they immediately replaced us with Slash and Steven. And the rest is history. And now here's my interview with George Patience.
Don had a lot of friends in Hollywood, believe me. Tommy Lee was a great friend. I mean, the three of us would party a lot together. When I first came down to Los Angeles, just before I had met Sarah, I got hooked up on a sort of a blind date with a girl who was a roommate of a girl named Candace. And Candace actually was Tommy Lee's first girlfriend / wife. And I stayed with Tommy in North Hollywood and Candace. And Tommy was really, really good friends. I mean, we were terrible kids at that time.
Is Tommy and Motley Crue at this time?
Yeah, Motley Crue just put together their first album, but they were still taking the bus, so to speak. But, we're personal friends and we're doing, I'll put it to you this way. When I knew music, I grew up, I had a band when I was a little kid called Lips. It was a polka band. I'm from Vancouver, but I lived in Chicago when I was a little kid. And I used to play with this band that I put together, this polka band, and we used to do bar mitzvahs and weddings and things like that. We were always the opening act. But, I did go very far with accordion, and that's because my parents didn't want to lug around a piano. But I did do competitive accordion, and, I learned all the scales, and I could read music, and I was really good at playing, but I really loved to write my own stuff. And I was, influenced like any kid was by the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, even the Monkees. I dug that, but I had let it go. I mean, when I was in Canada, I was doing synthesizers. I was like 16 when I bought my first synthesizer, and I was totally into like Yes and Patrick Moraz and this techno music that was part of, the scene at that time. And then I got a little bit into punk, and I lived in New York for a little while when I was a kid, when I was about 18, 19, this is just before I met Sarah. And I lived in the Lower East Side in the Village. And I lived with, a couple of guys. The one guy who was actually played with Blondie for a while and with Talking Heads. And I used to hang out with Joe Strummer. He used to come to New York to play. And this is when, when CBGBs and the Mud Club and stuff were happening. And those are the people that I used to hang out with. Once I was at this place, I think it was, what was the name of the place? I'm sorry, I can't remember. It's a big venue in New York. A lot of bands played there, but I remember seeing the Godfather of Soul. He was sitting on a table laying out lines of blow, and Keith Richards came up and sort of bumped into him and sneezed, spilled his drink, and all the blow went flying everywhere. I mean, that was really funny. You know what I mean? I couldn't believe it. They almost got into a physical fight over that. I guess because, it was a little bit of embarrassment, and he probably didn't have any more with him. But these are the type of things that I would see on a regular basis. And that was the same with Don. David Lee Roth used to hang out with Don too.
That's what Sarah said that. And Sean Penn, right?
Yeah, and Sean, yeah. In fact, I remember one day I drove Sean what looked like he just climbed out of the dumpster from behind the Rainbow. This was at the Rainbow. You know, I drove him home to Malibu. He had no shoes on, and he smelled like a rat. And, you know, he was drunk as you couldn't believe, and he had no money on him. But David introduced me to Richard Lair, who was my first entertainment attorney. And Richard ended up becoming president of Hollywood Records and then Hollywood Pictures. But Richard, you know, a very powerful attorney, but he gave me the worst piece of advice in my life. And while I was doing that I Hate Christmas video, while I was putting it together, the president or CEO of MTV, he was calling me trying to get a copy of that video because MTV had no Christmas offerings, no seasonal offerings. And Richard Lair actually told me not to give it to them till I had a record deal, which would have changed the trajectory of my career completely. And Don was the one who said, yeah, go ahead, who cares? But it's funny because we're all trying to rely on each other as to how to do this. And that's why, to tell you the truth, the fact that there is a machine that is star making in Hollywood, but the fact that it's almost like acts are a pinball in a giant pinball machine, and they're being bounced around until eventually one of them out of hundreds or maybe thousands eventually hits it and then can make an actual career out of it. And that's why I'm really happy with the success of Guns N' Roses. Now, Guns N' Roses looked up to Don. Don was mentoring them. And I spent a lot of time with Axl and with Tracii and Jamie Sutton at Sutton Place Recording Studios, which Jamie was also the engineer at Take One and Red Zone in Burbank. And after I broke up with Sarah and we were together, I became, my girlfriend was Jamie Dudley, and she was the original manager for Guns N' Roses. And, you know, so, I mean, I was there for the first showcase, and I was kind of 50-50 on Axl, but Axl actually had an interesting look. I don't know if you remember years back or you looked back at any photos or anything, but at that time he used to wear a lot of white. So he'd have that red hair with white leather, which was a total opposite of all the black leather that you'd see most of the artists wearing. Now, one other thing people don't realize, and I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but Appetite for Destruction was written by Tracii Guns. And Tracii got paid a lot of money to leave Guns N' Roses.
I thought he quit.
I was there. He got paid to leave. Don and I went to see him afterwards at his house after he got that money, and he bought a house off of Melrose in the Fairfax district. And then this is, okay, I'm going to tell you something that he told me verbatim, and I had actually heard from other people, including Jamie. Now, Jamie got screwed in the deal on Guns N' Roses, too. And that's the one thing I'm not so keen on with Geffen and all that coming in, how they sort of carved it up and sort of people out. But they said that, and this is true, they didn't want Tracii because Tracii had really bad acne on his face. And that's why they wanted to replace him with Slash. And he signed a non-disclosure, which prevented him from talking about it, and that's why he left. But all of Guns N' Roses was, okay, I'm going to tell you something. Axl could play a little bit of piano, but the musical genius, the hardcore musician of that whole organization was Tracii Guns. And I swear to God, because I was there. And believe it or not, somebody out there might still have a 2-inch of me singing lead on Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Toilet. Welcome to the toilet, heeding nature's call. Step inside and stand in line, drain your lizard on the wall. In the toilet, sitting in the toilet with your pants on your knees.
Okay.
So anyway, that's...
No. We got to...
That's how deep this goes. And the rehearsals that we did and the cross-pollination, I'll say, of bands, okay, of the musical talent. So, like, everyone's sort of borrowing something from one person to the next person to the other person. It was very, very unique. I'll put it to you that way. You had to be there. And the other funny thing is that, yeah, there was times when money was tight, but it seemed like we always, no matter what, somehow we always had money. We always had a place, and there's always a life and daylight and it was like a nonstop party. It was almost like a dream.
So just to not bypass that just yet, you're saying that whole story was just made up of him like quitting the tour. They wanted to go up to Seattle, and he was like, I don't want to go.
Why would a guy who wrote the songs and was about to get money, who had nothing, was basically sleeping in his car, and I'm paying the rent on the apartment for him, and it's like, why would he do something like that? Where would I come up with this story? This is what I'm hearing from the man himself, from Tracii Guns. And then, and he's saying this to me and Don. Don's right next to me when he's saying this.
You were also saying that he was mentoring Guns N' Roses?
Yeah.
What does that look like? He's just giving them advice on what
Absolutely. And he would be there at the rehearsals, too. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that Don hung out. That's why, him and Tracii would hang out together, too.
And then was he still hanging out after Tracii left?
Yeah, that's when we went to see Tracii and to see how he's doing. We went to the house after he bought his house off of Melrose in the Fairfax district. And he was there with his girlfriend and stuff, and we hung out. And then I remember seeing Tracii again. I was in touch with him. I haven't talked to him in a long time, and nowadays it's not easy for me to get to somebody unless I have to actually physically go to a show that they're doing and then see if I could get their attention. But Tracii, then I was at Tracii's place when he sold the house on Melrose, and then he got when he did LA Guns, and then he had the place in North Hollywood that he bought, a really nice house there, and he had all these beautiful guitars. His guitar collection was fantastic. Tracii was totally into the music and to writing. And I'm glad that he was able to continue on and make a career and a name for himself in the business too. I'm really happy about that, because he was sort of like the odd man out of that whole Guns N' Roses routine, considering the fact that he was like the backbone of it, and he was one of the co-founders. I would have to say. His name is in the name of the band.
Oh, right.
That Guns N' Roses was financed by a big blow dealer. That's who Jamie was getting the money from. The guy was selling kilos of cocaine, and that's where the money came from for the day-to-day operations of.
Before they signed with Geffen?
Yeah, that was Jamie was able to executive produce the financing as well as manage the band. Now Jamie was a hot-looking girl, but she was also very, very smart too.
And
she was smoking hot, yeah.
And then, so what happened to her?
Jamie ended up, last time I saw her, I was with Don when I saw her. We went to a strip club that was one that was just over the 101 freeway. And Jamie was the hat check girl when we saw her. And she was doing that. And this was during, I'm sure she was, when I had conversations with her, she felt a little betrayed by what had happened with her not being able to maintain her position as the manager of Guns N' Roses.
And so is Don hanging with him when Tracii kind of gets successful with LA Guns, like when they put out that album?
They were still hanging out. And then I think Tracii came to this show when Don played in North Hollywood, when he opened for Hughes Thrall with M80. I think he was there as well.
Okay. So then Don with M80, is M80 the end of his bands?
Yeah, I think that was, for as far as I know, that was the end. I would see him a few times afterwards when he was living in a hotel on Sunset Boulevard, and he was dating this one girl that he was hanging out with, and it was kind of sketchy, their whole vibe. I wasn't sure what was going on at that time. He wasn't in a great spot as far as his music was concerned. It was almost like it took he was sort of, he's almost like on the fence of whether he's going to pursue it or whether he wants to go through that again. And when he was living when we were living in Benedict Canyon, he got the house with his girlfriend. He invited me to move in. It was a beautiful two-story place with a jacuzzi on top. Great spot up Benedict Canyon. And I love that place. And he had a girlfriend that was very, a cute redhead, really cute girl. Really liked her. And I thought, all right, he's got some stability and he's going to start to play again. And he was writing and was playing. And I could have sworn that would happen, but I don't know whether it was when he would go on a binge and drink and then the relationship broke up or what have you, and things happened, so he was sort of going up and down, and then he went back into painting for, to make a living.
So the house was after the hotel, living in the hotel?
That was that was previous to living in the hotel.
The house was?
Yeah.
Okay. But the house would have been after Ozzy?
Yeah.
The hotel, like what year do you think that is when he's in the hotel and you said it was kind of sketchy?
That I'm not sure.
Like late 80s or?
Yeah, I would say that would be the late 80s.